Teams. Please note the meeting is being live streamed and the recording will be available on the Comhairle's website following the meeting. In regard to the conduct of the meeting, a reminder of the following points. Please ensure your microphone is off to prevent background noise. I will call on the relevant officer to present the report. If a member or officer wishes to ask a question or raise a point, please do so using the raise your hand function on your device. I will invite each member in the queue to speak, and at that point, please switch your mic and camera on. After you have spoken, please ensure that you lower your hand and put your mic off. Your device should be positioned so that your image is clear to the other participants, and please speak clearly and concisely directly at the camera. When calling for agreement of the recommendations, a no show of raised hands will be taken as indication of the committee's approval. In regard to declaration of interest, members are reminded of protocol. You must leave the meeting by ending the call, which will be confirmed by the moderator to the chair, and following consideration of the item, you will be invited back into the meeting by the moderator. Please ensure you are available to accept the invite to rejoin. Finally, a reminder that the meeting has been live streamed and recorded. The recording will be available on the Comhairle's website following the meeting. We have apologies from Councillor Johnny McKeever and Councillor Ronald Fraser. First item on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting of the 25th of February. That's for approval and accuracy. I take it that's okay. Second item is declaration of interest. Members are asked to declare any interest they may have in any items on the agenda. It would be helpful if members explained why they're declaring an interest in the item concerned. No declaration of interest. Okay. Any amendment contrary to officer recommendations moved by a member must be based on planning reasons. If such an amendment is proposed, the chair may choose to adjourn the meeting pursuant to the time-out protocol. The amendment must be provided in writing before it is subject to a vote. Members are reminded that a decision which is not based on legitimate planning reasons would leave the Comhairle exposed to the risk of legal challenge and potentially significant costs arising therefrom. Item number 3 is construct access associated with the creation of a deep water port in Glomite Bay, Arnish, Isle of Louise. The report, the head of accounting planning, the report seeks delegation to determine a planning application for works which will form part of a development classed within the planning hierarchy as a major development. In terms of the scheme of administration, such a decision would otherwise fall to be determined by the Comhairle. The report seeks delegation to the Director of Communities to determine the planning application without further reference to the Planning Applications Board or the Comhairle, assuming the process raises no new sensitive issues and no significant body of representations received against the planning application. Helen MacDonald will speak to the vote and she will answer any questions. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you've surmised it almost, so I don't have too much to speak to. Yes, it's seeking delegation as recommended at 3.1 to the Director for Communities to determine the application. I have a very short presentation that I'll share with you. Hopefully that'll come through on your screens, but it was also available in the Dropbox documents. So the reference for the application, 2100108, it's to construct an access associated with the creation of a deep water port at Glomite Bay, Arnish. Members may be familiar with the proposal for the deep water port, and there was a previous application for planning permission in principle consented for a similar scheme 2 years ago. That similar scheme you can see outlined in blue, a much larger project in terms of the area that was included on land. The area outlined in red is the revised proposal from the Harbour Authority who are taking the project forward, and the area relevant to this application is this access point in red here. My apologies, just outlined here. A slightly more detailed plan where you can see it exiting the Arnish Road, and degree of cutting works and peat removal will be required, and you can see the position of the access as it would enter the separate proposal for the Deepwater Port area. I'll just leave that plan for you there. So the current application relates only to that access road, and the section is seeking delegation to the director to determine it subject to no sensitive environmental issues or significant representations to the application. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Helen. Members, any questions for Helen?
No questions, Chair. But I just think that we should agree the recommendations, given that it's been this is a project that's been many years in the making, and Stornoway Port Authority are now making significant inroads, if you pardon the pun, to get the project going, and the road quite clearly is a significant part of that. And then the construction will presumably follow on from that. So I see no reason why we shouldn't do anything other than agree the recommendation.
Agree.
Members agree the recommendation 3.1.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item number 4 is buildings to receive a house plan to process salmon morts, White Shore, Bay Head, North East. This is a report by the Head of Economic Development and Planning. These planning applications are considered sensitive by the appointed officer and are therefore presented to the board for decision. Anne Napier will speak to the report and answer any questions. Anne?
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can see that now. This is the presentation, covers 2 applications. The first, reference 19/00288, is for the use and extension of the building to house a biomass boiler, to heighten part of the roof and to install 2 flues. The second application, reference 20/00007, is to erect a building for the storage of fish morts before processing. There will be a single presentation for members today, and there is a joint report on both applications, but the separate conclusions have been reached and are at the end of the report. So the application sites are on the southwest coast of North Uist, and the site is coastal. And this part of North Uist includes good agricultural land, and the maca is worked, and the settlement pattern is that of linear crofting. This particular slide shows the site outlined here in blue. The nearest house is marked in yellow, and over here in purple is the new school for North Uist, which is just showing the context of the application sites. This site shows an aerial photograph of the wider site, and the wider site has been used for the burial of fish morts since 2005. And this building at the top of the slide is that was consented in 2014 for a different process operation. The design of the process has evolved, and the current applications are to accommodate the full extent of this new process. The applicant describes part of this as involving a biomass boiler, and SEPA considers it to be a co-incineration process. The developer, as a result of that, the developer will require a pollution prevention and control, or PPC, Part A licence from SEPA, who would regulate the process, including emissions to air, odour and noise. Planning is required to consider the suitability of the land use, the building and engineering operations, including landscape and visual impacts, and the related impacts occurring off-site. All other environmental impacts would be controlled by SEPA as part of the integrated PPC process. So this is something which is maybe slightly different to many planning applications, but there's very clear guidance on this within Scottish planning policy about the need to avoid the duplication of regulation. This is a 3D drawing of the buildings as proposed, and at the moment the details we have are incomplete. We don't have full details of the extent of external plant proposed, for example. So conditions have been proposed to secure these final details, partly to avoid the need for a further application on the part of the developers. This slide shows a schematic of the process and indicates that the fish would come into the fish reception building, into a reception pit. They would then pass through a fish mincer, which is referred to as a macerator within the report. They then pass from one building into the next building through a pipe into the dryer unit here. This plant here is the condenser for the evaporated vapour. The processed fish would then be separated into fish meal and fish oil, and the fish meal would go into a silo. Part of the fish meal would then return in and feed the plant here, which has been referred to within the application as a biomass boiler. The primary concerns for the management through the planning process are the handling of waste coming into the site and how outputs at the end of the process would be handled. So again, conditions are proposed in these respects. I have some images which indicate the scale and complexity of the process, as well as the context for the site. So as the label on the slide indicates, this is a view of the site from the north. And then this is from the same location looking back in the other direction towards Pavel. This is the existing 2014 building with the alteration to the roof visible here, and that's the east elevation of it. And then that's from the same location looking towards the fish reception building. And again, it's east elevation. You can see here the ramp that's referred to in the report that would be used for vehicles to unload the fish at the top of the ramp into the fish reception building and the pit. This shows the relationship between the two buildings and looking towards the condenser unit to the rear of the larger building. This is another view of the condenser unit, which you can see is located to the rear of this larger building and immediately adjacent to the fish reception building. So this is the dryer unit, the biofilters, and the boiler or co-incinerator. So you can see from the photographs that a lot of the plant and machinery currently exists, but they're not all of it as yet. So I'll now take members very briefly through the report. The application site and the proposals are described in some detail in section 5 of the report, and the planning assessment is set out in section 14. And this looks at a variety of different issues, including the development strategy, issues to do with waste management, environmental issues, community impacts, landscape character and visual impacts, economic impacts, traffic and drainage. The report considers that subject to conditions, it's concluded that the development would comply with the development plan, and section 15 sets out that no material considerations are considered to exist that would indicate a decision should be taken contrary to the development plan assessment. The conclusions are set out in section 16, and the recommendation is for approval subject to conditions which are set out in Appendix 1 to the report. Because of the relationship with the PPC process, these are very much focused on areas not covered by the PPC regime. And as a result, the number of conditions and the range of them is perhaps less than you might otherwise expect. They are all considered to be necessary and reasonable. Proposed conditions 1 to 4 are required to seek the further information for final approval. And as mentioned earlier in my presentation, partly this would be for the benefit of the developers to reflect the fact that SEPA have indicated they have no objection to the planning applications at this stage, but it's likely that there will need to be changes to the site layout and plant in order to meet the PPC requirements. Proposed conditions 5 to 10 are required to control the potential for off-site impacts and primarily relate to matters such as delivery hours, storage and access arrangements and such like, as well as the quantity of fish to be processed. I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Anne. Thank you very much. It's very detailed information there. Members? Councillor McMillan?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I welcome this report and I see it all as being very good. My concern is conditions on 7 to 10. And I was wondering, is there any reason for these conditions which constrain the work of the plant? Or is it simply put in to prevent continuous operation when the likes of losses experienced in Loch Erisort a couple of years ago happened, where there was a lot of disposal requirement, because hopefully for the salmon industry across the island, there won't be a huge need. But when it does happen, there is sometimes exceptional requirements. So it's just a query why the likes of condition 9 and condition 7 are put on when it's predominantly rural and what you might call an industrial rural area. Thank you.
Anne?
Thank you. Yes, the conditions have, as I said, have been fairly focused. They primarily, the ones that you've queried, look to control the activity site. So condition 9, for instance, reflects the quantity of material that's been referred to in the application submissions. It's understood that this would enable a similar amount of fish to be processed on the site as is currently the case. But the reasoning behind looking to control the amount of fish waste and also issues such as deliveries to the site is really reflecting in looking at the potential for impacts of this process to occur to local communities. So SEPA and the PPC permit would have controls, probably much stricter controls about the actual operation of the process, looking to manage the potential impacts that occur on site, and obviously they would be seeking to minimise the potential for off-site impacts to occur as a result of those on-site processes. The conditions that we're recommending look to minimise the impacts of issues such as deliveries occurring to the site late at night or early in the morning. One of the conditions, condition 8, is recommending that no deliveries should take place unless the processing plant is operational. And that, for example, is to take account of a situation where, for example, the plant may not be working for whatever reason, and you wouldn't be wanting to have deliveries of the fish to the plant unless they're able to be processed. So we've really tried to focus very carefully on the sort of minimum level of control that we think is necessary to be carried out through the planning process to protect the local community whilst without being unreasonable in terms of the operation of the proposed plant itself. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could have a supplementary on that, Chairman. I'm being led to believe that planning is a codification of the various things involved. And as I was told there, SEPA may have a different requirement. Why therefore are we imposing a constraint which is separate from SEPA by inventing constraints? We are in the process of economic development, and that is what we look at in terms of this as members. So I would be looking to remove the constraint to this economic development when as needed in conditions 7, 8, 9 and 10, so that it is conditions 1 to 6, but that we remove constraints which are invented by the coroner. If SEPA want to put in constraints, that is fine for them, but we are inventing constraints to prevent economic development in the process. So I would certainly look to change the condition as it stands to remove these constraints. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Colin. And do you want to answer that one?
Only very briefly, thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate really that the controls that may be exercised through the PPC permitting process would be limited to operations that take place actually on the site. So the management of the waste operation itself on the permitted site. The conditions that have been recommended to be applied to the Planning Commission look to control off-site impacts, because these are matters that go beyond that can be regulated through the SEPA process. As I say, we've tried very hard not to duplicate any controls that would be potentially operated as part of the permitting regime. Thank you.
And anybody else want comments? Alan, you want to back in again?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Well, if there's a support for my proposal, I'd be quite happy to go for, or I'd rather request a timeout procedure. I'm quite happy to do it in the open as part of the meeting if it can be supported, so that we have a proposal to the meeting to change the conditions as they are to reduce constraint on operation, profitability and development. Thank you, Chairman.
Second that. Convener?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, if we're going for a timeout process, I think we need to get some advice from the planning officers and probably Mr. McKeever in terms of what potential impact that might have on that particular development and the removal of these conditions, whether that is something that might come back and haunt us at some stage.
You got a seconder for your proposal, Mr. McMillan?
It's got other members of the committee to second it as appropriate. But that is my proposal at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Do we have a seconder for Mr. McMillan?
In that case, just go with
In that case, the recommendations are 3.1. That's agreed.
Thank you for Chairman. Thank you.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. Now, item number 5, sorry. Number 5 is the Drumlane Wind Farm, North Tolsta. This was a report by the Head of Economic Development and Planning. Unfortunately, Morag Ferguson, the planning manager, is unable to be with us today. With the board's agreement, I propose that we refer this item to be considered at Comhairle tomorrow at 5 o'clock. It has to go to the Comhairle anyway, but without Morag being here to explain and give us all the details, and she'll be here tomorrow evening to answer any questions on this development. And I propose that we consider this at the Comhairle tomorrow evening, if the board are willing for that. Convener? You're mute.
Apologies, Chair. Apologies. I'm quite happy for that to go before the Comhairle tomorrow, given the circumstances, and I do think it's important that we have the knowledge from our senior planning officer with regard to this application. So I think the best thing for us to do is to postpone consideration of this item until tomorrow evening, if everybody's comfortable with that.
You all agree to that one? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the meeting this morning. So thank you all for attending. Thank you for. We'll consider this item tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock at the full council. Thank you very much.
Thank you.